Welcome, everybody, to Chamber Chatter. Today, we're talking about a study that we're doing. We're just kicking off a study with Neuronic using a red light helmet. And I'd like to introduce a couple of players in that. One is Nicole Gregg. Nicole is a graduate from with a BSc in behavioral neuroscience from the University of British Columbia, with courses focusing on aging, cognition, addiction, psychiatric disorders, and neurology. During her time at USC, she worked in a lab focused on mental health outcomes for diabetics, and another lab studied the relationship between aging, cognition, and mobility. She's currently a clinical and integration specialist at Neuronic that works with providers, me, and clients to use photobiomodulation optimally. She is also involved in the current clinical trial by Neuronic studying mild cognitive impairment and works as a neurofeedback technician. And man, does she bring a lot to the table. She guides Dr. Twyla Wilson, sitting next to me. Dr. Wilson is a graduate of the University of Oklahoma in Norman. Additionally, she's a graduate of Chatworth College of Natural Medicine with a naturopathic doctorate at naturopathic medicine and PhD in nutrition. Dr. Wilson's a graduate practitioner of the Dr. Bredesen End of Alzheimer's Protocol 2.0, as well as a graduate of Trinity College of Natural Medicine with a ND in traditional naturopathic doctor. She holds numerous certifications, numerous, and degrees, including traditional medicine and acupuncture and homeopathy. Additional studies include certification in QEEG neurofeedback, which when Dr. Wilson and Nicole start talking, I leave the room. So that being said, Dr. Wilson also offers QEEG assessments in the office. She's MOCA certified. She offers light and electro acupuncture, aromatherapy, Chinese and Western herbology, allergy elimination therapy, and ART, hormone rejuvenation therapy, and functional nutrition. So that is a lot that we're going to have their expertise today. And I want to kick this thing off by, I'm just going to start asking a couple of questions of our guests. So, Nicole, how did you get, tell us about Neuronic. Tell us about how you got involved there.
Yeah, totally. So, Neuronic is a neurotechnology company that harnesses the power of photobiomodulation, which is colloquially known as light therapy, to help a wide range of people. And our mission statement is to keep your brain healthy at all stages of life. So, with that in mind, we created a transcranial photobiomodulation device, transcranial meaning through the skull, to deliver near infrared light to the brain, which increases the brain's energy supply, increases blood flow, decreases inflammation, among many other things. And another big arm of our company is actually invested in research. So we're currently working on a clinical trial on mild cognitive impairment. And we've partnered with several other universities and institutions like Santa Clara University and the Delray Center for Brain Health. We're also consistently working on case studies on the side, and one we just started with you guys with Hyperbaric Plus, looking at PBM for traumatic brain injury. So overall, I would say that our mission and our goal is to help as many people as we can using the power of light and making this technology as accessible as possible. And I actually found out about Neuronic when I was working at a neurofeedback clinic, and we were using it as a primer for neurofeedback, but also as a standalone modality. And so that is kind of how I saw the patient outcomes and client outcomes and wanted to learn more about the technology. And so I got connected with Liam, our co-founder, on LinkedIn, and the rest is history from there.
Well, I started researching red light therapy. I looked at a lot of different types. The Violite bed, red light helmets, there's a lot. Obviously, there's going to be a bunch more coming forward. But what made me look at Neuradiant really deep was a programmable helmet. I was blown away by the Neuradiant 1070. Can you tell us what inspired that? I mean, how did they find their way into the 1070?
Yeah. So The Neuradiant 1070 is a transcranial photobiomodulation device that penetrates into the mitochondria of your neurons, helps to increase ATP production, et cetera, as I mentioned before. And the device just comes with preset protocols, so fixed time, pulse rate, and intensity. But it also comes with clinical protocols, which you can kind of target certain areas of the brain. It's divided into four quadrants. And usually I'll work with Dr. Twyla with QEEGs and or quantitative EEG to see areas of overactivity or underactivity and target those as required. But the origin story of Neuronic and how we developed the Neuradiant 1070s is really cool, actually. It all started back in, I think, 2017 when our co founder Liam saw a video on Facebook of a man with Parkinson's disease. I believe his name was Max Burr, who had tried several different things to help with his Parkinson's, but to no avail. And he had come across a study on mice where shining light into their brains actually improved their symptoms. And so he decided to take a bucket from his garage and tape a bunch of LEDs around it and put it on his head. And after using this makeshift helmet, 9 out of 10 of his symptoms were gone. And he even started playing the piano again. So from there, Liam was super inspired. And after a series of events, got in touch with our other co founder, Marvin. And from there, Neuronic was born. So that's kind of the origin story and a little bit about the device that we currently have today.
Well, I had been working with Twyla for many years, and I knew she had QEEG, which brain mapping, and I knew the importance of identifying what part of the brain was in deficit, and more importantly, probably what part of the brain was normal. And so I started talking with her. I talked to her about your helmet. And if you would, why is it so important that the helmet is programmable?
Yeah, so our device, as I mentioned, comes with four quadrants that you can modify to target certain regions of the brain. And most of the time, as you alluded to, it's based off of a QEEG where you can see certain areas of the brain that are over or under activated and just region specific areas as well. And you can give those areas a little TLC. So, for example, one of our providers who works with kids with autism will often use a 10 hertz pulse rate just at the back of the head, so you can isolate it in that way of just having the back quadrant on and the rest of the quadrants off. But oftentimes, any areas you'll need to target will show up on a QEEG, and that kind of guides protocol creation.
Well, that's what got my attention, and that's why I pursued you. And after talking to Twyla, that was probably the most important thing to me. Was it's the only one I know on the market. I may be wrong today. I did this a couple of years ago, but that's what really got my attention. Now we see a lot of things that are coming from. Is it okay to say the C word, China? So we see a lot of components that. What are important about the components you all make your helmet out of?
Yeah, I think what's super important is the main thing, which is the wavelength that we use. We use a 1070 nanometer wavelength, um, and that's in the near infrared spectrum. So it's actually outside of the visible spectrum. And the super cool thing about using light therapy is that depending where you fall on the spectrum of light, you can kind of target different conditions. So, for example, jaundice newborns will often be placed under a blue light in the hospital to help break down bilirubin. And sometimes you'll see green light and things like that be used for acne. Red light is often used for skin and hair as well. So the near infrared light is actually, it's a common misconception that red light and near infrared light are the same thing, but near infrared light actually penetrates a bit deeper. And so we use near infrared light to with our 256 LEDs to penetrate into the mitochondria of the neurons and help generate more ATP.
Right. So, what are you seeing as being the low hanging fruit in your industry with your helmet? Is it cognitive decline? Is it Parkinson's? I mean, what are you seeing the most success with?
Totally. So just broadly in the research, I would say that there's four main categories of research with transcranial photobiomodulation. So first being neurodegenerative diseases, so things like dementia and Parkinson's. Another category is traumatic brain disorders, so stroke, traumatic brain injury, concussions. Third would be neurodevelopmental disorders, things like autism or ADHD. And then the fourth would be psychiatric disorders. So things like anxiety, depression, PTSD. And then there's that ambiguous other category that has things like long COVID, aging, learning, etc. That being said, that's kind of the research body. But as you introduced me, I work both at Neuronic and in a neurofeedback clinic. So I do have quite a breadth of clients that I see in both areas. And I'd say that the biggest and most notable improvements for me that are seen in our populations are the populations with dementia, head injuries, and autism, I would say. That is probably a bit skewed because those are also the three biggest populations that we work with. But we had a boy with autism go from scribbling on a piece of paper and saying it's a dinosaur to really clearly drawing a picture of a dinosaur and being able to describe it. I had one client with dementia whose husband actually messaged me saying that she's starting to cook again for the first time in years. And I know you guys as well have had some incredible improvements with your clients using PPM, just by itself or in tandem with hyperbaric oxygen. So there's a lot of great success stories.
I got one more for you, and this is going to make you get out your crystal ball. I know you got all this research, and that will drive which direction everything goes. But if you had a crystal ball and you could look into the future, where do you think is going to be the biggest outcome?
In terms of population,
And yeah, is in terms of the things that you're able to correct.
yeah, I would say just making this technology as accessible as possible, especially with that neurodegenerative population. We see Alzheimer's and dementia on the rise in recent years and probably continuing on for years to come. So I think just making this technology as accessible as possible and getting it out to as many people as possible is a super important mission for us. And really driving down the price point is another area of accessibility that we want to focus on as well alongside clinical trials to get FDA approval for certain conditions so that, insurance can cover it. And then obviously a big focus on research so that can further the field as well.
Well, I appreciate all that. I'm going to move over to Twyla and Dr. Wilson. I don't think I ever asked this question. I've known you for a long time, but why in the world did you get into brain mapping and neurofeedback?
Well, I my mother and my grandmother both had Alzheimer's, and, um, that was very compelling for me to decide to try to find some way to help people because, Nicole, you've already pointed out that, this disease is, it's spreading like wildfire, and the older you get, the higher your chances of developing it, and honestly, with what I witnessed with my mother and my grandmother, at the time, there was nothing effective. Now, my mother was a brilliant woman. At the end of her life, she was a botanist. She was sitting in the garden with me. I said, "Oh, look at that beautiful red plant, Mom." And she turned to me and she said, "I don't know what red is." I mean, that was so devastating to me. I just couldn't believe it. She died about 2 months after that. That's, what the kind of the end of her life, but that experience compelled me to try to find something to turn people around because honestly, there isn't a lot available on the market. And from what I can see with biomodulation, such as what you have with your cap or your hat, um, this produces, pretty rapid successes. It's relatively easy for the client to do because, a person is impaired when they have these kinds of conditions. You cannot ask them to do tons of stuff. It's too difficult for them. Like, I work with Dr. Bredesen, I think he's brilliant, and his protocol does work, but it's extremely complex, and even little things like the Brain HQ to actually be able to go in and sign up for that and do it every day is very complicated. That's like a brain training thing. So, the ease of use and the efficacy are extremely compelling for me with this, and so I'm just so delighted to be part of this team and be able to help other people because if I could spare one person from going through what I've gone through with my family, I mean, it would be worth everything.
So I've known you for a long time. I know you've been doing brain mapping for a long time. So simply in a How does brain mapping work and why is it so important?
Well, the brain mapping is it's called QEEG or quantitative. It's you put a cap on the person's head. It measures in the one that we use for Neuronic. It measures 20 different locations of the brain. It analyzes the brain output from that, and I don't know. Probably most of you don't know this. There's 52 functional regions of the brain that are responsible for different kinds of things like executive functions, visual acuity, hearing, memory loss, and whatever. So there's those 52 regions. And then there's these brain waves that are alpha, theta, beta, delta, and gamma that also control how you're, so like delta, for instance, is sleep. Theta is the twilight time when your brain does most of its data processing. Uh, Alpha, when you're just doing general things. And I think, Nicole, when you talked about the child with the dinosaur drawing, they were giving him alpha frequencies at 10 hertz, right?
Yeah.
So, the different brain waves help people at different levels. So then beta is when you're doing things, and then your gamma is like the conductor of the orchestra. It helps coordinate all the activities of the other brain waves. And so the fact that we can help regulate those across the different 52 regions of the brain and help with the brain organs themselves. So, for instance, inside the brain, deep inside, this is why 1070 is so critically important, because there's an organ in the brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is responsible for conducting all the traffic that your brain processes, like your association with cinnamon and Christmas, or your ability to connect different things, store memories in different places, retrieve memories. And Dr. Bredesen's team discovered that organ shrinks over time. And yes, from lifestyle issues and what have you. Anyway, so as it shrinks, it loses its ability to make those connections. So he was also the first person to prove that could be regrown, by the way. So, when you use the light therapy, it is my belief that it goes in and stimulates the hippocampus and some of the other brain organs to grow back. Other organs also shrink over time. So, you want to have your amygdala working. You want to have your pituitary and your, all these different glands that you have in your body and your brain. You want them to all be as optimal as possible for brain health, and I believe the 1070 light actually helps to create that optimization. Further, as you've already pointed out, some areas of the brain, and this is why zoning is so incredibly important, you're going to have inflammation in the frontal lobe on the left. You're going to have mitochondrial dysfunction or low functioning on the occipital lobe on the right. And there's going to be, other things going on. So, your brain isn't uniformly dysfunctional in the same way. So each area has to, so when we do the QEEGs, we identify those trouble spots and actually whether they're inflamed or they're low functioning. So that, you see that on the map where they take that information and we look at it also and how it affects the different brain waves. And then we come up with, or Nicole comes up with, a program to help normalize that. So as you normalize these conditions, the person starts to have higher functions. And we saw one guy that he was, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the MOCA test, but the MOCA test is a score from 0 to 30. He made a 6, I believe, on his test. So really, that's very low functioning. After only 10 days of using the CAP, his physical therapist called and said, "Oh my gosh, what did you do to this guy? He's doing stuff he hasn't been able to do in 2.5 years." I mean, that was so thrilling. And his wife has reported to us that he's had all kinds of breakthroughs in the last 6 months or so since he's been on the CAP. That is so gratifying as a practitioner because, I mean, how many practitioners with people with brain problems actually can report that they've seen positive changes? I mean, it's scarcer than hen's teeth.
Nicole, can you give us some insight? Because I know you work in both sides of this really deep and you have longer than I have. I'm just curious, are you seeing the red light helmet replacing neurofeedback?
I wouldn't say it's replacing neurofeedback. I'd say there's a really great synergistic effect that you can have with neurofeedback. A lot of the neurofeedback providers that we work with will either use it as a primer before neurofeedback or use it as a standalone modality, especially if people are using it at home, just because it's a great at home use as well. But it does provide your brain with energy, which is great before going into a neurofeedback session where your brain can tire from all that training. So I wouldn't say it's replaceable, but I'd say there's a great future for a larger synergy between the two modalities.
I've got a lot of veterans that dive, and they haven't really taken advantage of the brain mapping. My first graduating class, which was in 2000, they all went through Twyla, did the brain mapping for them pre and post. And as they were doing hyperbarics, we wanted to monitor the change in that. Um, don't know that we ever came up with I never saw a study. I'll say it that way. Our hyperbarics just blew up, and it was kind of hard to keep up with. But I know that there were things that were quite visible on a lot of our veterans that have blast injuries and traumatic brain injuries. Are you seeing the veteran community starting to step up and use red light helmet? I know my veterans here, we have a helmet on site that whenever they come and dive, then they have access to go in a room. They can schedule out that time. And I don't charge anything because I want to see what this will do with hyperbarics and see what kind of turnaround we get. So, are you seeing anything that you can point at in traumatic brain injuries?
Totally. And yeah, with the veteran population, I would say traumatic brain injury and PTSD are the two main players in that domain. I will say we work with a lot of VA doctors. I know there's one in Washington, close to where I am. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, but not too far from me. That we work quite closely with, and a bunch of other VA doctors around the states, and also just independent organizations that focus on veterans as well. I think the really key player with traumatic brain injury and PBM is that PBM is neuroprotective as well. So not only can it help repair certain areas, so it helps with neurogenesis, which is the birth of new neurons, and help those injured areas that you have from traumatic brain injury. But it's also, like I mentioned, neuroprotective. So if you're in a line of work where you have a lot of head impact, whether it's sports or um, in the military or whatever it is. It's also neuroprotective in that domain so that you can go to work, use the helmet before you go to work, and it can help the trajectory of a head injury afterwards. So it can help heal you a bit faster, recovery times a bit shorter. So it's both proactive and reactive in that sense, especially with traumatic brain injury.
So, what is a protocol? I mean, how do you see practitioners using it, getting the best results? Again, I'm not a person with initials after my name. I don't have any therapist on our staff. I know what the red light helmet can do, and I just give people access to it, and it's exciting. The crazy things that people come, even even hey, because of your all's warranty, I've got. I'll call my client that has bought the helmet, and I'll call them in 90 days and say, "Hey, what about that helmet? How's it going?" Well, I'll be talking to the wife, and she won't give up the helmet. She goes, "Hey, I don't care what my husband says. I love this helmet because her hair is growing like crazy." So not only are we seeing these cognitive issues, you know, be treated, but it can be used for so many things. I've even got one of my clients, and I had to call Nicole about this, and probably this will get edited out. She lays in the recliner and puts the hat on her face.
Well, Nicole, we were talking about this yesterday, how there are so many residual benefits from using the cap because it does have systemic implications. So even if they don't put it directly on their face, they're going to get collagen production, they're going to get the hair growth, they're going to have, other benefits that, like the inflammation reduction probably systemically for just from using the cap even on the head without directly, putting it on the, area, like, let's say they have a hurt knee or something, which they could do that too, but,
How you've seen it work in tandem with hyperbaric oxygen. I know you sent me that report of the right eye report of somebody who was using hyperbaric and then started using PPM and hyperbaric, and they had a great great outcome. I don't know if you want to expand more on that of the synergy between the two modalities.
Well, I would love to. And just to be clear, we do hyperbaric air. We're one of the few. In fact, I just got off the phone today with they're studying hyperbaric air at the University of North Dakota, I believe. And I wanted to connect them with you, Nicole. Um, are you working with anybody at University of North Dakota?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Well, I want to make this provider aware of that because they're using hyperbaric air there as well and studying it very deeply, which I didn't even know was going on.
Mm.
So in fact, they're even talking about making plane fuselages into chambers to get them on university campuses. So they're going to go to the boneyard and pull out these airplanes and modify them and put them on campuses, and which blew me away. So we use Right Eye. In fact, the person I was talking to this morning that's at University of North Dakota is a Right Eye expert. He's a vision specialist. He helped me get introduced to Right Eye 5 years ago. And so that's something that I'm trying to get more hyperbaric facilities to use because it's so simple to give a Right Eye test and it's so telling. Um, the test that we did that I sent you a copy of, we had a client that had a stroke 1 year previous, so they're 1 year post stroke, and they were kind of negative. They weren't real interested. They had given up on everything else, and they said, "I'm going to try hyperbarics." So on her first session, she gets out and she goes, "Well, I can't tell anything." And I said, "Well, this is not a one and done, but I hope you'll try it." And so, sure enough, she bought a package. And so she came back 8 times before we had the opportunity to do a right eye test. So now she's been in the chamber 8 times. We did a right eye test and she scored a 20, which is very, very out of 100. That's very, very low, incredibly low. I don't hardly ever see that. So she started diving again. She did 8 sessions of hyperbarics, 5 sessions of the red light therapy helmet, and one neuroptimal. We use neuroptimal neurofeedback. And so that's what she did in 45 days. And she scored a 69. Now, the biggest change in that was adding 5 red light helmets. And I have to tell you what was so exciting about that was her whole demeanor changed when she saw that score because as you all know, when people are doing this, it's such a subtle progression. You don't notice change. It's the people around you that haven't seen you for 30 or 50 or whatever days, and they run into you and they go, "Wow, what are you doing?" And so she didn't notice this change. When she saw that score, I'm telling you, her whole personality changed. And now she walks in with a smile every day, jumping in the chamber, runs in to do the red light therapy, jumps in goes and does the neurofeedback. And, that positive attitude has a lot to do with how you're going to progress.
Yeah, totally. And I think quality of life is like such an underrated thing when we're talking about these different conditions, whether it's neurodegeneration or head injury or whatever it is. There is that scientific basis of PBM where you're having neuroprotective factors or neurogenesis or what have you. But it's also that quality of life outcome of people having more energy to do the things that they used to be able to do, play with their kids, their grandkids, and take part in their daily life as well.
Well, I think it's important what you just pointed out that people do not, they start to give up after a while. And I had this kind of happen to me when I first met Paul. I have had traumatic brain injury, and I did not know that I had post traumatic brain injury syndrome. And so I did a lot of hyperbaric with the company. And, I thought, gosh, I'm just getting old. I can't do spreadsheets anymore. I'm not able to do this website like I used to, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I just thought, I'm just kind of sliding off a cliff there. After I did all that, my brain, if Paul told me this would happen, at some point, your brain is just gonna turn back on, and it did, and it was like night and day. All of a sudden, I'm back to doing spreadsheets, I'm back to doing websites, I'm fixing my stuff up, and, actually, what you said, Paul, I had a client who I've had for a long time. She said, "What in the heck happened to you? You're so different than you used to be." And I said, "Well, I started doing hyperbaric." And she goes, "Okay, I'm gonna start that," because she was so impressed by how much I had changed for the better. So, I cannot say enough. Plus, my eyesight even got better, which I love that. But, the hyperbarics by itself is fantastic, but then you had these cumulative benefits from the helmet and the neurofeedback. Maybe they can do some dietary changes or whatever. You know, uh, People have hope. If they could get this message, if we could get this message out, because most people are like me. They just think, "Oh, I'm sliding off a cliff. There's nothing that can be done. I'm just getting old, blah, blah, blah." Well, no, you can come back. And then Dr. Bredesen says you should really not have any noticeable decline in your cognition as you age. But most people think you should, that it's like you're going to start falling off that cliff. And that is absolutely not true. We can help bring that back. And then you pointed out, Nicole, quality of life, it's everything. You're going to clean your house, do your dishes, start cooking, playing with the kids again, driving places, enjoying vacations, all the stuff that you're giving up on because you can't. Right.
Nicole, I assume you've seen this a bazillion times as I have. I'll have a person bring their mom or dad in and they'll say, "Hey, what can we do for this? Left the keys in the refrigerator, whatever. They're noticing a decline. What do we do about it?" And we'll have an hour consult and we'll, lay out a game plan. And 2 years later, they'll call and say, "Hey, we think it's time to start." And I'm like, it was time to start 2 years ago. And
Mhm.
I can't drive that home enough that people, they see a decline and I don't know what makes them wait 2 years. As soon as you see that decline, it's imperative that you start the process because you may not gain anything back. If you're going to, it's going to be right at the very
Well,
first.
it's going to be so time
Yeah.
consuming. And the second thing, Dr. Bredesen talks about this all the time. If you have a family history of anyone with cognitive decline in your family, you should get on this in your 40s, not when you're 60, 70, 80 years old. You need to start on it now because, it's a lot easier to have that stitch in time than it is to have to completely go and, rebuild everything after it's completely crumbled. You don't want to start rebuilding your house when the roof's caved in, you know?
I'm going to give everybody a teaser because I just watched two videos, one at 2 o'clock this morning and one on my way to work. And no, I don't watch the video, I listen to it. But on the way to work, Dr. Berg is talking to William Davis about supergut. Are you familiar with any of this, Nicole?
Yeah.
I'm going to send you some links because when you understand what they're identifying in our gut biome and uh, the one microbe that's missing from all of us, 96% of us are missing this one microbe. If you replenish that microbe, it is going to be a game changer. I think when you add that to a red light helmet and hyperbarics, what I heard this morning is absolutely stunning. And I can't wait to start on it. And I'll send you guys some links. I'll probably put those links if it's possible, Betty. I'd like to put those links because when people watch this, it's going to be a game changer what they're finding out on this microbe. And Dr. Berg, he had him on the first time, and then he said, "Okay, well, I'll try it." So 6 weeks later, that's why he did the second video because everything that they talked about in the first video, he could not believe what changed in his person. And he's at the top of he's pretty good health. I mean, that's all he talks about is health, and he lives that life. And this was a game changer for him. And I think when you put it into the red light helmet, hyperbarics, everything that we're talking about being
Well,
synergistic.
the neurotransmitters are made in the gut.
Yep.
So if your gut microbiome is off, and you've already pointed out most people's are, uh, you're not making dopamine, you're not making serotonin, you're not making GABA, you're not making the things that your brain needs to function properly. So, getting your gut right is very important. And I think people don't realize there are so many things, that we're doing that cut the efficacy of the gut, like we take antibiotics and we don't realize We think, oh, just eat some yogurt and that'll replenish it. Well, it's not enough. You have to do more than that. And I think in the book Super Gut, they really talk about the more things that you need to do to bring that gut back. And in fact, like weight loss and even hair growth, by the way, is uh, triggered by certain gut microbiome.
Well, I encourage everybody to go look at these links and go watch these. They're very short videos, and you will end up buying a yogurt making machine.
Yeah, you need to make
That's
your
what'll
own.
happen.
You need to make your own.
Yeah, yeah.
What you see, all these green dots and then the red dots show you, what we were talking about the zoning and how important it is. So what you see with this particular brain map is the person has trauma in the frontal lobes. They have a little bit of trauma in the parietal area and then the occipital on the right. So when you look at how that's affecting this person, you see the gauge at the top and you can see that, out of a potential of 100 or 10, the person is, what is that, about a 3.5, something like that. So their overall cognitive efficiency is impaired from this issues that this person has. And then if you look further, you down that report, you see focus, mood, and relaxation, I believe. So the focus would be your beta, that's how well you react to just daily life and how well you're able to respond to things. Then your mood is going to be your alphas. And then your relaxation is going to be your delta and your theta. Delta and theta have to do with sleep issues. So one of the things that we talked about was this person has a good ability in sleep, but they could be improved because the more their sleep is improved, the better their focus is going to be because they're tied together. It's called the theta beta ratio. So, and then if you look at their mood, oh, they really need a lot of improvement there. And it doesn't mean that they're moody. What it means is that they're ruminating. Uh, let's see, I've got it right here. So they're ruminating. Ruminating is like when you think of a problem, you try to figure out what to do about it, and then you never figure out what to do about it. So it's constantly going around like a hamster wheel. So it's very depleting of the brain energy. And then like excessive self-concern. So this is not a criticism of the person's personality. What it happens that when you know there's something off, you constantly trying to figure out what to do about it. And so, of course, you have self-concern. Now, people that are sick, that have, different horrible diseases, autoimmune diseases, or, different things like that, they have a lot of this. And it's very depleting, again, of the brain's energy. So, we want to, try to help the person. And so you think it sounds funny that, oh, I'm going to give you this light therapy and it's going to help you with all this stuff, but it does. It helps to correct these deficiencies in these brain waves. And when those start to become corrected, the person is able to resolve their problems. They're able to be less, reactive to things. They're, more uh, self-reliant. They have better sleep. They just overall have all these amazing benefits. And so, we a lot of times we don't think about that. I mean, when people have traumatic brain injury, they may know, oh, I hit my head really hard, but they don't. We talked about this earlier. They don't realize their personality has changed. So, how the person was before and how they are afterwards, there's definitely a difference. And their other family members and friends are definitely going to notice that. Well, if we can help bring that person back, we can tell them what we're looking at, like, oh, it's affecting you like this. You're ruminating, you're aggressive, you're, socially inappropriate, which again doesn't mean you're streaking down the street, but it means you're not decoding social signals in your environment properly. So, as you think somebody's yelling at you when they maybe just raised their voice or different things like that. So you're not responding to things properly. Those things can be repaired. So, even things like just your mood in general. So, one of our clients who has a cap said, I would keep the cap just for the fact that I have sunny days every day now. And he said, I was a rain cloud before. I did not have any good days before that.
Well, Twyla, what's really crazy about that? There are several pages there that breaks down every part of the brain,
Oh, yes. They're extensive,
and
18 pages long.
yeah, so there's a taste of what it is. But what would be neat is to show the brain map.
As you saw in that document, though, there was some red dots at the top. That was the frontal lobes. And then just behind the left frontal lobe, there was a red dot that was a little bit further back. That's the parietal area. And then there was a red dot on the right-hand side in the occipital area. So these are indications of each one of them that's impaired. And there you go, clinical report. And you said page 5 on that. So what we can do with the cap is we can zone that. So we could address the specific issues that are going to be different for the frontal lobes as opposed to that occipital area. Or let's say it's a temporal issue, then we can zone that differently. So it's not uncommon when you look at the maps to see a very large inflamed area in the frontal lobe, because so many people have been in car accidents and they have had head injuries from that. It's not uncommon at all. Then you might see an occipital lobe issue because, as the brain shakes from a concussion, you're going to hurt your front, you're going to hurt your back, but they might be presenting differently. I might see inflammation here as I might see mitochondria dysfunction back here, which shows up as blue or low functioning in the back. So we can zone to address those specific issues differently than, just as far as, it's not a ubiquitous treatment.
So, as Twyla was saying, that's that theta to beta ratio, which compares those two bandwidths to each other. And as you can see with the numbers here and the color orange indicating moderate, you can see a slightly elevated theta to beta ratio, and that could indicate some troubles with attention or impulsivity, more of those ADHD type symptoms. And then if you go to page 7, you can also see the magnitude, which refers to the intensity of the neural activity in a given frequency. So for delta, theta, alpha, beta, and high beta. And you can see most notably in the alpha region there with all that red activity, there's some excess alpha activity and then reduced beta activity in the beta and a bit in the high beta range as well. So this could indicate kind of like a foggy brain, having troubles paying attention to the task at hand. Like Twyla said, beta waves are very active when you're engaged in a task and focusing on something. So that might be an area you want to target. So a protocol I would recommend is doing something like step 1, continuous wave protocol in all 4 quadrants of the head. So that is similar to like the glow preset protocol that we have. It means that it's 100% intensity and no pulse rate, and it's just continuous wave light being administered to the brain. Step 2, I would do a break. So just turning off all the quadrants and making them gray. This can help the brain absorb the photons that have just been administered, and instead of just bombarding it with a bunch of photons all at once. Step 3, I would do something like 14 hertz in the beta range, and I would do that in all 4 quadrants as well to kind of target that blue area there. And then to just give a little extra love to the front of the head there, especially in that high beta range, I would do step 4 as 20 hertz and then just doing it in the front there. So turning off the left, right, and back quadrant and then just administering it to the front quadrant, that 20 hertz to help with more of that brain foggy, attentional type difficulty.
Nicole, while we're on this picture, I want to bring up something that happens to me all the time. And I have people walk in all the time with a script for 40 sessions of hyperbarics and an image that they did at the Amen Clinic. And it's a spec image that's nuclear MRI. It's got contrast in it. And I'm like, for the same cost of that one scan that says you have a brain problem, you can own a helmet, you can get the brain mapping done, and now you're fixing your brain. instead of putting contrast in your brain. And I don't know how to get in front of, I think the world of Dr. Amen, don't get me wrong, but he's accumulated 140,000 spec images at $4,000 a piece just to tell people that you're sick. This is what's wrong. And I always tell people, man, if you were to come here and get a brain mapping, we're getting a lot of the same information. It's not the same information. It's obvious brain waves, but it's going to show us a deficit just in a different way. And not only do you find the deficit, but you also have a way to do therapy to repair that deficit. And do you run into that as much as I do? I mean, do you hear about people getting spec images? I'm just curious.
We've had a few. I would say some people will ask us if we can use one of those images to help generate a protocol, and that's just not something we've looked into too much at this point. But most people are willing to get a QEEG. QEEGs are pretty accessible. Obviously, if you're living in a smaller town or a remote area, it's not as easy to get them done. But there's a lot of great technologies coming out that offer remote QEEG as well. So you can do it from your own home. Sometimes they'll send you a kit and explain how to do it. Obviously, you got to make sure the data quality is good, as Twyla and I know too well. Sometimes you can get poor data quality, and that just skews things entirely. But I would say that a QEEG is a great option to get a closer look into your brain and look at how to help it the most.
Well, I mean, for the cost of a hat and brain mapping, to either end up with a picture or a possible different outcome, I mean, from the same cost, it's a no.
Yeah, the value
I guess I can't say no
proposition.
brainer, can I? It's a
Yeah.
no brainer.
But I've had that also happen where people bring this back and they, but I want to use this. And I'm like, well, that's really great, but we
Well,
can't use that.
what's really crazy, Nicole, is at the end of 40 sessions, they feel great. Man, this is awesome. We did the right eye pre and post. They've got their life back and they go, I'm going to go get another spec image so I can see how much it improved. And I'm like, no,
Right.
you don't want to do that. If you're going to spend another $4,000, do another 40 sessions. I mean,
Yeah, even the mocha too, like Twyla uses the mocha quite often, and just being able to see the pre and post mocha, even if you can't, afford or access a QEEG, seeing those type of psychometric testing options, the pre and post version of it is pretty astonishing as well.
well, I just want people that are watching this to understand there's other options that are much less in cost and really you
Well,
start your
it's
recovery.
important because, once you get to a certain level, doesn't mean you need to stop. You need to keep going. I feel like people need to use these technologies for the rest of their lives. Now, they may not have to use them at, twice a day, every day for, the rest of their life. But once they reach a certain threshold, they should still keep using the technology. And so it's, they're going to get cumulative benefits throughout the time. So to your point, Paul, yes, they should spend the money on therapy, in my opinion.
Totally.
Well, I think we're probably at the end of this one. I think we've opened up a lot of doors that as we were talking, there's a lot of things I would like to talk about. So I'm going to down the road, if you'll be so gracious as to join us again, I would like to have another one because I got a lot of questions that came up as I was doing this interview. So I'm going to call that a deal. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Dr. Wilson, for joining us today. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate. It's Paul at hyperbaric.plus is my email address, and hyperbaric.plus is our website. Neuradiant is it's Neuronic in neuronic.com.
Neuronic.online.
One line.
Oh, I'm sorry, .online. Well, I'm glad I asked. And Twyla, do you have a way for people to contact you directly?
Right. It's Dr. DrTWYLA Wilson, WILSON ND at gmail.com. I welcome you to reach out.
So thanks for attending Chamber Chatter today. And Nicole, thank you again. And Dr. Wilson, we'll see you in a minute. We got people lined up. So
Well, thank you.
we'll talk soon.
It's been a real pleasure, Paul. Thanks
right.
for having us.
Thanks for having me.